The four types of superconscious, namely Vitarakanugat, Vicharanugat, Anandanugat, and Asmitanugat, known as the contemplative, the thoughtless, the blissful, and the heavenly, have ego for support, and the refuge of holding on to that identification accomplishes the completion of the next four types of superconscious meditative unions, which are described here sequentially. The four states of gross, subtle, causal, and the greater causal are experienced in the form of enjoyment, where the enjoyer, the enjoyment, and their union is supported by the mind. That mind substance keeps playing in these four states of the single conscious spirit. Therefore, the one who rules the four types of world is called Jagadishwara, the universal Lord. He, not being subjected to any gender of man or woman, plays about with the four. That is the peak of the total state, and attainment is holding on to the changing nature. That is why the experience of spiritual practice is known as superconscious meditative union, the fifth kind. In the Yoga Shastras, this is known as Savir Kanugat, self-conscious meditative union. At the time of annihilation, the five primordial elements, along with the threefold manifested state, gets absorbed into their respective unmanifested magnificence of the state of pure consciousness. This experience is often encountered. At that time, Jagat Brahma, the support of the gross world, gets dissolved. This experience happens when it has to happen. Therefore, when a Samadhi Sadhak yogi is practicing superconscious meditative union, he will sacrifice the gross world as described above. He will rest in the actualization of the fourfold superconscious and experience the self-conscious meditative union. At this time, he is established in the subtle body through his consciousness, which is the support for the single pointedness of the mental vital consciousness substance. Therefore, this experience is known as superconscious meditative union, the sixth one. In Yoga Shastra, this is known as Savicharanugat, single-minded contemplative meditative union. Similarly, when the elements of the subtle body gets absorbed sequentially, it is linked to the causal or greater causal state through consciousness. The identity of form and the nature of single pointedness of the mind is the support, the likes of which prove to be useful for holding on to. Therefore, this spiritual practice is known as superconscious meditative union. In Yoga Shastra, this state is known as pure bliss, superconscious meditative union, and it is the seventh union. Absorption of the causal states. When this happens sequentially and the causal creation gets absorbed, the consciousness experienced therein is connected to the greater causal state. This means that in the whole greater causal state, the consciousness can be experienced by holding on to it, which means it can be actualized. Where there is union and tendency for concentration, there is a dependence on it. Therefore, also, it is called superconscious meditative union. This is the eighth type. In Yoga Shastra, this is known as blissful superconscious meditative union. Since the fourfold causal matter becomes absorbed and the state is of total causal matter absorbed in meditative union, the consciousness here is of greater cause. Beyond this, there is no further absorption. Therefore, the single pointed tendencies end here. In summation, when one attains the siddhi of superconscious meditative union, by following the steps sequentially, one becomes an excellent yogindra, eligible to move on to actualize the experience of supraconscious meditative union. In this manner, at the time of final annihilation, Three states are absorbed. There is no fourth state. This means that consciousness, which is the support of the Atman, and the fourfold causal matter gets absorbed into the conscious spirit. Therefore, it comes into manifestation once again in the following kalpa. Thus, the games of Leelas of the world contain uncountable rules. The origin of the manifested state is in the unmanifested, and its manifestation from the absorbed state begins at the time of creation of the world. The elucidation to clarify the tools of meditative union is explicit to the students of a Yogendra only. However much one may explain the subject, it is incomprehensible to others. But those who are thirsty for it will be able to get it from a person who is an authority on the subject. And for that very reason, the subject is explained here in so much detail. It is definitely going to prove to be very useful. As already mentioned, the absorption of the three states is of a permanent nature, which means that a similar union of three states does not happen ever again. In a similar vein, when the absorption of the greater cause happens after the absorption of causal matter, the conscious spirit, who is in the form of consciousness, gives up the inherent nature of the conscious spirit. Because if causal matter does not exist, what is the use of conscious spirit? This is the knowledge gained from experience. It is even felt that I am the support of the fourfold causal matter. This feeling feels like bondage, as though the fourfold state acts according to his own orders, and that is why he is called Jagadishwara. He alone orders everyone else. There is no one who orders him. Jagadishwara begins to feel the pressure of being the support of all gross elements and feels himself in a bondage. Therefore, to give it up, he begins to sequentially practice meditative union. This is explained from here onwards. The four kinds of state prove to be illusory. Therefore, he throws them aside by contemplating on how am I the support. When he connects in this manner, the feeling of that state vanishes and the sense of support also automatically becomes absorbed. Since he is left only with consciousness, with his attention fixed on his soul, so when it completely dissolves, only a void remains. Then he is known as Soham Brahma. In this manner, after attaining the complete essence of Tvam-pada meditative union and also dissolving the fourfold aspects of the body, the void that remains is called Soham Brahma. This is the essence of Tat-pada meditative union, which also gets sequentially absorbed. And what follows is the capacity of the yogi to become deserving of attaining the Asipada meditative union. He becomes free from all illusions. He experiences the void and becomes Soham Brahma. Note: Ajnani, meaning one who has given up the threefold enjoyments and has attained the knowledge of Tattvam Asi, Swasamvedya Brahma, that is a supremely excellent intellectual yearning for the actualization of the science, attains Nana Vidam Tadam Yogam Yunjanti, which means Sagun Brahma endowed with the fourfold consciousness of the body and the actualization of Tvampada. Having attained the fourfold superconscious psychic powers, he goes on to attain the actualization of the consciousness of the fourfold superconscious siddhi of the Tatpada. Then the sadhak who has completed Tvampada can practice the Asipada yoga and become deserving of receiving the psychic powers related to it. In short, the sadhak who has brought the fourfold body and its support, the proud ego, for fulfillment, and dissolution of the causal matter elements, goes on to practice supra-conscious meditative union, which is conducive to the dissolution of the causal matter. The eightfold causal matter is held on by the yogi and is the only attainable and possible support for him. Therefore, the single pointedness of the mind is possible for the sadhak. With the absorption of causal matter, that also gets dissolved. Thus, for the supraconscious samadhi sadhak, the restraining tendency, meaning that which causes the calming down of the tendency for single pointedness, is similar to knowing the absence of support, and that alone becomes helpful in samadhi sadhana. Yunjanti brahmaikya bhavatyaya brahmabhuta bhavanti means that in tattvam asi brahmapada there is not only a complete absorption but also an identification of the results, because in the word yoga the skill of meditative union is taken into account. Thereafter the verse Sanyogatmaya Panchavida Chitta Vritti Nirodha explains the siddhi of Sanyoga and absence of Tat. It indicates the capability that will be accomplished through the restraint of the fivefold tendencies of the mind, meaning restraint of even the restraining tendencies of the mind. Therefore, only that yogi who has accomplished the psychic powers of superconscious and supraconscious meditative unions will be capable of attaining Purna Yoga. This secret is necessary to be kept in mind. How is one going to actualize the totality of Swasamvedya Brahma from the Tattvam Asipadas? If that is not so, and it is going to become an experience on the conclusion of the Swasamvedyata, knowing of oneself by one's own self, then how will it happen? And what is the nature of that sadhak yogindra's previously attained state? How should it ought to be? After the conclusion of Tvam and Tat Pada, through superconscious meditative union, psychic powers, how does one bring to conclusion the Tat Pada and Tvam Pada to the state of Asipada? The methods pertaining to this are being told in the next chapter.